So when we start the engines, we're going to need to leave the packs off because in the event of an engine catching fire during startup, we don't want the fumes to enter the cabin, so that's why we leave them off. And then after the engines are started up, we turn them back on. And we have to turn on the APU switch and the isolation valve. This will allow bleed air to flow from the APU into the engines, which will cause them to start spinning. And now with all that done, we can request pushback. I use an add-on called Ground Services X or GSX, and that provides a whole bunch of cool ground service vehicles, including pushback. So the pushback tug is coming into position. Just have to wait a little bit. As you can see, it's in position. The ground worker over there is going to ensure the gear is locked to this bar over here.
Locking gear.
So it's going to ask us which direction we want to be pushed in. For our runway, we're going to want the nose to go to the left and the tail to the right. So, choose the setting.
Completed. Bypass pin inserted. Release parking brakes. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Okay, so it's beginning the pushback, and now we can start our engines. So to start our engines, we need to use these switches over here. We're going to start engine number 2, the right-hand engine first. We're going to select ground. This will cause the fan to start spinning. And then once it is spinning fast enough, we're going to select this switch. It's called the fuel control switch, and this will ensure that it will start the fuel flow into the engine and the whole combustion process, so the engine can sustain itself. We're also going to want to trim our stabilizer to correct setting. So our stabilizer is trimmed right now. With our engine number 2 started, we're going to start engine number 1. We have to wait for it to spin up a little bit. There we go. We're also going to want to set our flaps to the takeoff position of 5 degrees. Pushback is almost complete, so let's wait for that to finish.
Set parking brakes.
Waiting your confirmation for good engine start.
Okay, we just have to confirm to the ground crew that our engines have started up well, and then they can go ahead and disconnect the pushback tug. So one thing we're going to want to do is calibrate our altimeter. We need to calibrate our altimeter because when we at any place in the world, the air pressure changes, it never stays the same. And an altimeter works by measuring air pressure. The higher you go, the pressure decreases. and the altimeter will display in higher altitude. But when we get above a certain altitude,
Tow truck disconnected. Bypass has been removed.
in the United States that's 18,000 feet, we're going to switch to flight levels, and that is the altitude at which all aircraft will change their barometer setting to the standard pressure, and this is all has to do with air traffic control purposes and keeping your planes far apart from each other so they don't get too close and run the risk of a collision. The next thing we're going to want to do is set our auto brakes to RTO, which stands for
Left is clear. Right is clear.
rejected takeoff, and that will automatically activate the automatic brakes if the pilot decides to abort the takeoff by pulling back on the throttles. Now I'm going to go through my checklist to make sure I did everything correctly. We're going to want to check our flight controls to make sure they will move. This displays our position of our ailerons, position of our elevator, position of our rudder, so on. So we're going to have to make sure that nothing's blocking them. So let's go full right, full left, neutral, full up, full down, neutral, rudder, full left, full right, neutral. Our flight controls seem to be working. So let me look at the checklist again. We need to turn off our isolation switch, turn on our packs. We can shut down our APU since the engines are providing us with electrical power. Then we need to turn on our taxi lights. So now everything looks good. We can begin our taxi to the runway. So to begin our taxi, we advance the thrust a little bit. It's going to take a couple of minutes for us to taxi to our runways, so I'm going to kind of leave it here and then pick the video back up once we arrive at the runway.